If you're on a low carb or a carnivore diet and you have unresolved health issues, maybe you're holding on to weight, maybe you have hormonal issues, maybe there is excess inflammation that you can't get rid of, or anything else that people are talking about that they resolve when they go on a carnivore or a low carb diet, you will want to watch this part of my interview with Harry. We discuss all these things and he will give you some sound advice on where to start and what things you can try and things that doesn't cost a ton of money to do. Enjoy. If you were to recommend someone who's already on a very low carb diet, don't do a lot of processed foods or other things that would increase deuterium, they are leptin resistant, they can't lose weight, what would you say? What can they do right now that is easy to do, that anyone can do, that doesn't cost a fortune?
Okay. They need to really reduce all high deuterium sources, all of them. That includes also water, tap water. First of all, you shouldn't be drinking tap water.
But that's going to be expensive.
My water is basically alpine spring water. Now, it does have a slightly lower deuterium level, at about 136 parts per million, so it's way lower because it has to do with the elevation. So if you're buying, I usually say to people, if you're buying spring sort of glacial water, the higher the elevation, the better. So if it comes from a mountain source that it's much higher up, it's going to be lower in deuterium because of the UV component. So the fractionation, as it's called. So that's the how I pick mine. And so I use this water primarily when I need it, but primarily for my coffees. That's where I use it. It's not cheap, I'll have to say, but I only use a small amount. And I know that dairy, like the sort of stuff, and I don't, I'll have two coffees and maybe 3 coffees a day. And that's most of my hydration because I've actually allowed my body to hydrate with fat and upregulate my antidiuretic hormones by when you're not consuming shitloads of water like the tribal people do, what happens is you upregulate your antidiuretic hormones and your requirements for both sodium and water go down because your body starts regulating better all the ions and all that. So you don't have and I've actually even done experiments where I've cut my Deuterium because it is an osmolyte that regulates that for like a week. And I haven't noticed much difference when you're cramping or anything like that. So my body seems to basically now manage fluids and ions much better than it did in the early days when I was doing. So, and that's actually by restricting the amount of water. And pretty much tribal people don't drink water. You don't see them drink water. Even Mary noticed that. They just do not drink water. They just get whatever they get from the food and the fat from their body. It forces their body to basically produce more water, metabolic water. So it's a better way and a healthier way, and it avoids high deuterium water from taps and fluoride and everything else under the sun. The less halogens into our thyroid, the better. So it's those sort of things that I find important in terms of allowing the body can regulate itself as long as the old saying, get out of the way and just give it the species appropriate food, get out of the way and the body will regulate itself. As I said, the only intake of water that I have is probably about 600 mils a day from water, and the rest is milk. Yeah, and the rest is just coming from animal fats. I don't have dehydration or anything like that. So when I'm not having any water whatsoever, completely, I've actually done this experiment, I'll only get the coloration become a bit yellowy. No different than animals in the wild. They just piss and it's sort of yellowy. When I consume the deuterium depleted water and I'm having my coffees, I notice my water it goes slightly lighter. So, as I said, if you can access your fat adapted and you can access water, your urine isn't going to go dark. So there is really, and it's what it also does is you actually see stability in your blood pressure and you also see stability in your heart rate, which was really interesting. So reducing the water intake and actually allowing the body to produce its own water and to regulate the fluids in the body seems to have far better results. I think a lot of people are consuming far too much high deuterium water. They're flushing out electrolytes and they're causing themselves a whole lot of derangements, and also not eating enough protein. And I'm a big protein fan, as you know. Not eating enough protein also has a deleterious effect in terms of holding on to electrolytes as well. I'm one of those people. I lightly salt my food. I don't heavily salt my food. I don't consume very much water, and I get most of my fluids from that. And I don't seem to have a deleterious effect, because if I did, I would notice it in my urine. I would notice my urine getting darker and darker if I was being dehydrated. That's the problem. People need to understand is your body has been, like with every other species on the planet, has adapted and knows how to regulate itself, and it's been doing it for thousands or millions and millions of years or whatever. I don't think nature is that stupid. I think humans in the 20th century and onwards think that they are smarter than nature and have found marvelous ways of actually deranging themselves and then blaming other things other than their own stupidity, their so-called stupid intelligence, on their problems. It's a funny realization when you come. It's a humbling realization when you realize how little we know and how far we're divorced ourselves from that sort of ancestral, you could say, wisdom that we once had, all of us.
Yeah.
And we handed it over to the MDs, we handed it over to the pharmaceutical industry, we handed it over to all these other people, and they abused that privilege and used it against us to profiteer at our own expense.
So what else can people do?
I would say, depending on, there are other biohacks you can use. As an example, depends. I mean, sort of, if people have got like some deranged hormones and stuff like that, I usually say to people, take boron for a period of time. It seems to normalize, but you don't want to take it in high doses because it does have an effect on depleting potassium and magnesium. So you don't want to take it for a too long period. So you take for a week 12 milligrams, then you drop the next week to 9 milligrams, then to 6, and then to 3, and you don't do it for more than 3 months. And it usually does sort things out. Some people may need to take, because due to a number of things, it can be sometimes some of the methylation, or sometimes they're having problems in dealing with excess estrogen and stuff like that. And my younger sister had a bit of that sort of problem, and so I got her on calcium D-glutarate, and that sort of sorted her out. So she's doing much better. She's just a year young, 11 months younger than me. God, Dad was active in that period. That's all I can say. Dirty old man. Anyway, let's move on. And so she's taking that, and she's seen results. A number of other people as well, some postmenopausal people that have taken calcium D-glutarate and seen improvements. Some people that have been excessively exposed to xenoestrogens, males, and may have some issues with estrogen as well, do see benefits in that regard. With detox, it also helps because it prevents certain types of bacteria from breaking down the sort of when bile encapsulates certain toxins in a certain way and sort of detoxify that, certain bacteria can sort of inhibit some of the membrane of that sort of concoction that is built. Well, calcium D-glutarate seems to inhibit that effect, and so allows for better detoxification and excretion of those sort of toxins. So it's quite interesting. And there have been animal-based mechanistic studies that show that it does come out in the feces far more. So we know that it does happen. And I suspect in other, when it comes to humans, it's really hard to do some of this research. You're getting past an ethics committee. It's a bit wild in that regard. So sometimes that's all we've got to rely on. But for completeness, I need to be candid about these things, what they are and what they're not. I would also say to people that if you have been exposed to high deuterium foods, you may have to be less focused on, body composition and more focused on trying to dilute your deuterium levels in your system by increasing your fat intake to a very high level and allow yourself to be weight stable while you're sort of diluting over time, and give it a couple of years to dilute properly, and then you can go and do your cut and, get into your bikini or whatever. Sometimes rushing may end up causing more problems in the long run. And it depends. Some people are much better at deuterium depleting. Some people are much poorer. Also, going out in the sun does help because you can actually reduce the level of deuterium per hour by 19 parts per million. So you can actually get a deuterium depleting effect from being outdoors. The other thing is obviously, in order to reduce the oxidative stress within the body as well, grounding is really important that people do. I do some of it. I know you guys do quite a bit as well. What we do is that if we've been exposed to certain types of inappropriate foods, processed foods and all that, it's a question we have to be a bit more strict with ourselves. I know it's hard, but if you're going to get the results, and if you've got, thyroid issues, you've got all sorts of things, and these things are not resolving themselves on a carnivore diet, then deuterium is probably a problem that I find. When people do a lot of sunbaking, get on a species-appropriate diet, start eating a bit more animal fats that are lower in deuterium, they start seeing improvements quite a lot across the board. But and they're improving their vitamin D levels, because vitamin D also seems to, some of the it is a cofactor in some of the enzymes, and it seems some of the enzymes involved in dealing with deuterium as well. It's not clear, the research, but it does seem that, because this goes back to those MMP sort of collagen integrating enzymes and all that are also affected by deuterium levels. And it just seems that there is some relationship, some interaction. So there is an associated relationship, but it's not clear. But I have noticed that when people go out and sunbake and get their vitamin D levels quite well, they actually do see improvements on how they feel, their energy levels, their thyroid function improves and all that. And that's probably working on a number of different levels. We know that vitamin D is really good for the thyroid, but also lowering the deuterium threshold. All these things in combination are improving the functioning of that component of the system. And so I think that those sort of lifestyle factors, and I know it's hard in some regions for people to do, but it's something that they do need to consider. The other thing is for healing blue light exposure, wearing these sort of glasses, later at night. These are daytime when you're working, so you can reduce the amount, because it's the amount of that's coming off screens. The amount of blue light is far more excessive than the normal daylight levels. I do have lights in here as well that have a circadian design to them. So when you open them up, turn them on, it's the night one, and then you go click, and then it'll go to the daytime, and then click to the afternoon one. So they have 3 settings of different, and the spectrum is very close to that which is within the natural environment, like being outdoors. So I can be indoors working from home and have that, and have very similar conditions like outdoors, as if I was outdoors nearly. In terms of the type of frequencies, light frequencies that I'm actually, my melanopsin is picking up. All these sort of things help, but I think the big one is obviously the diet. You can't be putting crap into your body and expecting results. You really have to be a hell of a lot strict, especially when you've got more damage than anything else. It's hard, and I know you deal with a lot of people with addictions, and it's a hard slog for a lot of people, because it's not only yourself, it's your friends, it's your family, it's the way people socialize and live. So there's a lot of things to unpack, and I'm very sympathetic, but I usually say to people, if you can do at least 70 or more % things that are going to help you, that's all going to pay off in the long run. Don't worry about some indiscretions or falling a bit off or doing something wrong or having something inappropriate here or there. That doesn't define you. That shouldn't basically drive you, I've done some naughty things, so now I can, who cares, I'll just do a whole lot of others. Well, the threshold, as I said earlier, does matter. Yeah. The lower the threshold, the body has some capacity to overcome. The higher the threshold, it's going to be a hell of a lot more problematic. It's going to do a hell of a lot more damage. You can't justify it in your own mind like that. You need to remember the amount of poison you put in will make a small difference or a very large difference. So you can't justify it. I cheated a bit, so I can cheat more. You're just going to do far more damage. You'll be back to the old days, which caused you to come to the carnivore diet in the first case, or to a low carb lifestyle.
So the take-home message is, you don't have to be perfect. You just need to
exactly
reduce the amount of offenses to your body.
Precisely. Yeah, that we need to basically bring down the amount of offending things or things that will cause deleterious effects to our body, but we don't need to become extremists in a sense. We live in a food environment. We live with other people. We socialize with other people, and it's not. I don't view it as slipping up. I think slipping up is when you're not doing it deliberate, but you're doing it
Against your will.
because you've allowed yourself to basically, you've become so strict to yourself that eventually you'll fall to the temptation. If you're trying to heal yourself, that's a different thing altogether. If you're trying to heal yourself, you need to be really disciplined for quite some time. And I was, because I had a lot of health problems to reverse my cardiovascular disease and all that. If you've got cancer, you've got a whole lot of health. You've got to be disciplined if you want to survive or you want to fix your body.
Yeah.
That requires a lot of discipline. But if you're, the general carnivores out there and stuff like that, that don't have many major health problems or problems like that or whatever, having the occasional indiscretion within the social settings and all that isn't the end of the world, and you shouldn't be basically chastising yourself, so to speak, is what I'm trying to say, and feeling guilty and stressing yourself for no good reason. Oh, I'm going to lose 3 seconds of my longevity. Really?
That's probably gonna cut more years off of your life
The
than having
stress.
occasional treats. Yeah, for
Exactly.
sure.
Stress is a killer.